Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Jet Rails podcast. I'm Robert, your host. Today, we're going to be talking about prices. Sometimes an area that is overlooked, that merchants don't spend enough time optimizing for. And we're going to be talking about looking at your competitors' prices, evaluating your own, basically what you should be thinking about aside from just the normal conversation of how much would you like to charge or what would you like your margins to be. But in reality, what's it going to take to make the sales that you want to make and to really take the business where you want to take it? I'm joined today by our guest, Burc, from the pricing team. And Burc, would you do the honor of introducing yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for inviting us and inviting me to this nice podcast. So I'm Burc, like you introduced. I'm the CEO and co-founder of this company called Repricing, which is in a sense competitor price tracking plus dynamic pricing software for e-commerce companies of, I would say, all sizes from all around the world. So like I said, we help actually companies in two ways. One is actually essentially collecting all their competitor pricing info. So we provide them a little nice dashboard where they can see, all their competitors charging various amounts to the products that they're selling. But on top of that, we also provide an engine that actually uses all that data to come up with optimum price points for our merchants' products. So essentially, it's actually two levels of services. Fortunately, we currently work with, hundreds of companies from all around the world, mostly small and medium-sized businesses. So this is actually not necessarily an enterprise play, but we work with even like small e-commerce startups. But we also work with some, Fortune 500 companies. And we are based in Istanbul, Turkey. But like I said, we are like fortunately a global company now. Turkish customers make only about like 1% of our client base, maybe. And we are a team of 50. All based in Istanbul with some other folks in different parts of the world just to cater to our global, let's say, customer base. But basically that's it.
Wow. And before I dive in on the pricing, I always love to ask about the company names. When I see Price Sync, I think of synchronizing prices. Was that just a natural name that you fell into? Was it a hard process to figure it out?
Yeah, correct. We like I said, we currently help companies in two ways, but the primary actually origin was this synchronizing all the competitor prices in one screen. So we started up as a competitor price tracking tool. Then came this dynamic pricing vision, but fortunately, that's also quite relevant with Sync because we essentially like sync our customer prices across multiple channels on their web shop, on other platforms and stuff. So at the end of the day, we also like this, pronunciation of our name because mostly companies pronounce it like pricing as the.
They're going to price a product, yeah,
that's pricing a product. But then we say, it's with Sync. So it's an icebreaker for demo calls with some VC introductions and stuff. But I also really like the name and also the logo that comes with it, by the way. So we also, if you can see it. It's also like
sure,
kind of
synchronizing all of our video viewers that you've got that. And I think that's interesting that thinking about it as something that is a little bit of a wash, rinse, repeat kind of a process that, like most things in e-commerce, that it's not static, it's dynamic, that it needs to be changing. It needs to be reevaluated. So speaking of which, one of my first questions for the day, when I think about some of this, I always worry about the race to the bottom about, if you just keep watching your competitors and your competitors just keep watching you, don't you all just start to price yourselves out of the market by really hitting rock bottom? Is that part of the challenge here, finding the right place where the consumers got value and you're still successful as a business? Or how do you, as an expert in the field, approach that that piece of the conversation? Because I imagine for some merchants, that's what they're most worried about is, I don't want to give up my margins. I don't want to lose profitability with it.
Well, actually, that's the major counter argument we receive against our value proposition, I would say. So we always hear this on demo calls. We also hear this on webinars and stuff. They all, this race to the bottom thing is quite common to hear. But like after a free trial period with us, or maybe after a few months, years time, we and also our clients noticed that we also actually, as much as discounting initiatives, we also help those merchants to increase their prices in a smart way as well. Because if you think, if you actually look into things from the opposite angle, due to your maybe like solid cost advantage because of your relationship with your existing suppliers, if you follow just a simple dummy, I would say, cost-based pricing where you apply, I don't know, a strict, harsh profit margin like 20% on a given cost without considering the market conditions, market prices, you may end up with a really low price in the market, which is, maybe 25, 30% cheaper than the cheapest of your competitors. So on the contrary, we also help our customers to detect these type of price points, which are way lower than the market average or way lower than the cheapest in the market. So our dynamic pricing engine can actually help our merchants to increase their prices in such conditions. So in that case, this is not necessarily race to the bottom at all. But on the contrary, we help them not to leave any money on the table, because let's say if they increase their prices by 10%, 50%, or I don't know, in hard cash terms, like $50, $100, they would still be the cheapest in the market. So if you think in, I don't know, microeconomics term, their sales volume wouldn't be hurt. So they will sell as much as they were selling with the cheaper price, which was the minimum price. But they will have this additional $50, $100 markup on their sales. So this actually brings us to the main value proposition of our solution. So we always claim that optimum pricing is not necessarily minimum pricing, but it's actually really finding your sweet spot in comparison to all your competition in the market.
Well, and I imagine there are unique things that come up, like if you notice that a lot of product from competitors is out of stock. Yeah. And, at that point, it's a supply and demand question. You can raise your price a little bit and probably still, make very healthy sales, because where else are people going to shop for it?
Correct. So, this is also one of the major, let's say, action items for our clients. So we also provide, like you said, stock availability monitoring in addition to price monitoring. So in such cases, we also alert our customers when, for example, high demand product goes out of stock at their major competitor. And like you said, this gives them an opportunity to increase their prices because, the customers don't have any other option to buy from. So this gives also an upper hand, especially during, for example, periods of times like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, etc., where almost everything is in high demand. The merchants that fail to plan their inventory well, or encounters this issue a lot. So they start their discounting, I don't know, on day one of those, let's say, 4-day periods, and they go out of stock on day 2. This is a big mistake because they lose a lot of money on the table. But anyways, if our users are monitoring those guys with deep discounts, they don't match their discounts during that remaining 2 days period just because they saw the discount on day 1. But they noticed that this competitor went out of stock on day 2, for example. So they also, like you said, increased their prices. So yeah, it all makes sense. So after all, what I'm trying to say is that we are not necessarily always helping our clients to make discounts, but we also help them to increase their prices in a smart and competitive way.
Interesting. And look, when you're going to scrape data, to read data from other websites, basically, you need to know what you're competing against. Is that always, and I don't want to misuse the word here, but relatively easy? I don't like to call anything in tech truly easy, but are there times when the data isn't publicly accessible or easily crawled?
Yeah, technology is supposed to make everything easy, right? But building technology is not always easy, I would say. So the finished product, makes things look quite easy. But at the back end, I would say about 95%, this is just, random numbers with some guesstimates, obviously, but about 95% of websites from all around the world are quite easy to get data from. So you can just visit them like a human being with an proper browser, so you can collect the data. But in some cases, even even a consumer might have some, issues with visiting the website because it loads a lot longer than average. For example, you need to wait for 3 seconds for the homepage to load. So in that case, a regular shopper would even kind of be pissed off. So they won't really read the price from their browser. So our robots might also have some hard time to deal with such.
I finally found the benefit to having a slow website. It's hard for crawlers to read it too.
That's correct. I mean, maybe a small one, but yeah, it's a benefit if you look at it that way. But yeah, I mean, such cases create some problem to us. But again, I mean, it's not really a big benefit because, if we detect that, we also, react against it. So we, for example, wait for 3 seconds for the pages to load, and then we get the data. But at the end of the day, creates some problem. And also some other issues are related to, location-based pricing, for example. So some websites show different prices for visitors from different parts of the world. So it really depends on your IP, for example, especially in Europe. This happens quite a lot. So, it depends on the country you visit the website from. But this is, I think, going to change, by the way. European Union came up with a new regulation where they say that all prices will be the same regardless of the location you visit. But this is also one of the cases. So I would say price localization might cause us some, hard time. But other than that, I mean, as this is really our business area, even if we encounter with tricky issues, that's our job to come over them, get through them, and that's how we do. And not to brag too much about that, but pricing currently monitors more websites than the total sum of all our competitors out there. So I would say this is really our muscle. I mean, I'm not really that actually I can't really say the very same thing about our dynamic pricing sophistication because there are tons of other AI-driven engines out there. But this price scraping thing is, I think, our superpower in a way.
Cool. I think, and I suppose that, the other exception to the rule is if something is B2B and it requires a login, or there's something that's basically, if it's not publicly accessible, it's not publicly accessible, that there might be certain things that can get in the way of the scrapers. But
yeah. I mean, again, I can directly comment on that. I mean, we can technically overcome that, but commercially, we don't do B2B scraping, for example, because the data is not public. So there's a reason why it's not public. So unless it's public, we don't collect it with commercial, let's say, purposes. But again, I mean, technologically, you can overcome that, but we don't do that. And I think it's also going to be, history, to be honest, because I read a lot about B2B commerce. I mean, that actually is a conversion killer for B2B commerce. So B2B companies are also more inclined towards showing their prices publicly nowadays. And I think that's really going to be a history in the coming 5 years or so. So that's also a good news for us, I would say.
Yeah. A strange question popped into my head. In my agency days, once in a while, I'd have a challenge that we'd wind up doing Google AdWords, running Google ads for, 2 companies that were competitors, or we'd wind up doing SEO for 2 companies that were competitors. Usually, businesses had some differentiators. They weren't exactly the same, but there was going to be some overlap in keywords or things. Have you thought of any challenge around that as you grow and I imagine support different customers that serve up the same products? Basically, your own technology is being used to help 2 competing entities to fight for the same sale?
Yeah, I would say we have some countries and industries where we serve about 50% of the market, for example. So we have, let's say, 10 major companies in that vertical of the country, and we serve about 5 of them. So this is a real case. So there, the thing is also about costs. So, price is one side of it is actually competition, but the other side is also your purchase prices. So the money that you pay to your suppliers. So these guys are also competing on costs. So if all those merchants are coming to our engine with different purchase prices, so different margin targets, etc., it changed the whole game. So even though we provide them the same competitor prices, their strategies differ, their cost base differ, so they can actually come up with different pricing strategies. So I believe we actually are not really an agency. So we are mainly, I would say, independent data providers. So we don't really provide, any action on behalf of our clients. So
sure.
we just
Thinking back to advertising, to digital marketing, you're a tool that provides, in relative terms, keyword research, or
correct. I
you're
would
going to
say
tell
that. And
them,
Search console. That's
yeah,
exactly
yeah,
what I was going to say. So
it's
everybody
a
uses that.
tool. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
That makes sense. Yeah, does it? And I imagine some strategy goes into this, maybe at a higher level. So some of it's going to be individualized based upon their wholesale purchase prices or costs. Their some of those internal understandings. But I imagine that there's also, look, you'll discount a high ticket item to drive people in, and then maybe try to leave the margins higher on peripherals or add-ons. So you sell the TV on sale, but you want to sell the extended warranty, the cables, the whatever other accessories, whatever streaming devices, whatever it might be, at maybe more of a premium where you'll make more profit. Do those sorts of things fit in any way with your platform? That kind of intelligence that, what is going to be a primary product that drives the user to the store, and then what's more of a secondary impulse purchase?
I mean, this input primarily comes from the customer. So we don't really have a particular, let's say, data collector engine that comes up with that decision of the assortment. So they actually, for example, we are working with a merchant that has, 20,000 SKUs in their web shop. So that merchant can pick, any 100, any 200 products from their assortment, which they regard as, competitive in prices. So they focus on that particular assortment as a price competitive assortment. So they actually optimize their prices for that key value items, let's say. And then they actually don't really do the same thing for the remaining long tail products, because they are after more profit margins over there. So they are not really playing that competitively, because like you said, I mean, this is also the case for example, diapers in mom and baby e-commerce. We see this a lot. So we work with, for example, tens of hundreds of mom and baby web shops. So they always monitor the top diapers in the market, and they always try to be the cheapest for those products, because those are the products where parents are always in the purchase.
Yeah, but you're probably not going to price shop a pacifier that just to hit order minimums and things. It doesn't make sense. So maybe formula and diapers, strollers, things that people are going to price shop. That's what you look at. But the Burc cloths, or whatever it might be, I have little ones. So many products.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, hard to name all. But I mean, they are actually making that decision at their end. So they actually define those key value items. So they can actually pick, even 10%, 5% of their whole assortment and dump that into our engine. So they only monitor that assortment rather than the full assortment. And
that makes sense. So if they're selling electronics, the TVs, the cell phones, that's what gets monitored, not the cell phone cases, not the cables. That makes perfect sense. So focus on the categories and things. That's probably pretty easy for most merchants. It's probably going to come down to key categories and things. And how often do you think merchants should potentially be adjusting prices? I know as a shopper, I might be a little, I don't know what the right word is, but a little turned off of every time I come back to the site, because sometimes it takes a while before you make a purchase. You're thinking about it, whatever the reasoning is, lots of reasons I could throw out there, but you don't purchase immediately. You come back and all of a sudden the price is $10 more. The price is, up and down. And how often do you think it's healthy to potentially be repricing? And I imagine that maybe there are just some products that are so commoditized that they do change more frequently.
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on the market you're active in. So also indirectly, it also depends on your competition. For example, if you are in a market where you compete against Amazon, which is actually the whole market, I know what I'm saying. So, people are used to Amazon's real dynamic pricings. So they change the prices, once in every 10 minutes or so for some of their products. So if you are, for example, using an engine like ours, which is actually repricing your products against the whole competition, which includes Amazon, we would typically recommend you some price changes. So this was actually the way we began this repricing thing. So we were recommending, pricing actions once in every 4 hours, 6 hours or so. But people also started to say that, okay, I don't really want to change my prices for 5 cents only, so put some threshold there. So we actually came to the point where we don't necessarily need to answer your question, but rather than that, we actually set some thresholds of price changes. I mean, you don't necessarily need to change your prices for, 1%, 0.5%, but if there's actually a meaningful discount opportunity of, let's say, more than 5%, 10%, then change your price, but don't really piss your customers off for just, $1 price increase, decrease, because that really actually is the problem. But if you spot any opportunities where you have the chance to, uplift your margins for, 10%, just do that, even if you would need to change your prices, twice a day. So that's actually where we found the sweet spot. So people are now able to set certain thresholds. So if we don't really hit those thresholds, we don't really reprice them. So the real question, the real answer, is actually not the ideal frequency, but the ideal amount of price changes, I would say.
So I think that makes sense and there are carts that I know when I go into that cart, it tells me that, look, these 5 prices have changed since you were here 2 days ago. And I know often for some stores, it's the weekend that their sales from last week ended and the new sales started. And so that's almost to be expected. And in other cases, it's just like, what's happening here that this thing needs to be repriced over 10 cents?
I think we will all get used to that in a way. I mean, I think the things are moving really in that direction. So it's not really going to decrease, but, increase more. So the price dynamism, I would say, is going to increase thanks to tools like us, I would say.
Yeah. Well, at least, if anything, I think it keeps the price a little bit more honest to, something that it should be, because, for most consumers, understanding how a seller, how a merchant came to a particular price, it's completely arbitrary in the eyes of the beholder. And we've been talking a lot about goods that might be identical across the board. What happens if instead we're talking about maybe some kind of a direct-to-consumer product where, yes, they have something that's unique, that's made just for them, that they make, but they still have competition out there making similar goods, making competing goods. Is that something that still gets monitored through a tool like yours? Or because it's not the same SKUs, it's not exactly the same item, is that just too difficult to really automate today?
Well, actually, we can automate that, but I mean, I would be honest. I mean, this is not our really power use case, but we have, I would say, maybe about 3-4% of our client base are like direct to consumer brands, like you said. So we have some mattress companies, for example, some furniture brands using our tool to benchmark their own products with same, let's say, specifications, features against other branded products. So this still works. So the way we help them in the tool is that we help them to define the competition. So on the identical product side, we use our own matching technology where we find the all competitive products out there automatically. So we help them to monitor them with a click. But for the D2C part, for the non-identical items, we actually let the driving wheel in the hands of our merchants. So they actually go through their assortment one by one and they say, okay, for this SKU of mine, I want to benchmark this against this SKU of my competition. So they handpick all the competitive items in the market. So they draw this, let's say, landscape, and then they actually benchmark their own product prices against them. And they obviously not necessarily benchmark their prices head to head, because maybe they are more premium than the others, or maybe they are actually less premium than the others. But it at least gives some, how to say, perspective. So if they're actually putting, ridiculously higher prices than their competition, just because they think that they are premium, this might end up with no sales at all. Or if they actually think that they are a budget solution, and if they are selling their product, 50% cheaper than the premium version, maybe this is actually too much of a discount, too much of a, let's say, budget option. So they can at least set the tone, I would say, of their own branded products. So long story short, they can benchmark it, but this requires some further input from the user of the tool. And it's actually not necessarily, I'm maybe speaking a bit against our solution, but I think in D2C, this type of price benchmarking is probably not the most important aspect of the business. That's how I see things. I mean, it's really important. It would be nice to have in your tech stack a tool like us. But I think we are not the mission critical tool in that type of business.
Competitive research is a benefit, but basically if you're not building demand for your product and your brand, it's going to be a tough journey.
Correct.
And what happens? So I'm going to flip the script a little bit. I've dealt with merchants that have map pricing, manufacturers pricing being applied, where let's say that HP printer can only be sold for this price. You can't discount it more than that, even when you want to. What happens in those situations? Because at that point, you can discount just so much through normal, discounting practices and such. Have you found that leads to any challenges or different strategies for merchants that are selling those kind of goods, where the manufacturer is slapping those rules onto the products and they've got to abide by them?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I would say, a gray area of retail. So we, maybe you might also ask this at a later point, but we also work with brands. So this MAP, like minimum advertised pricing monitoring thing, is actually more relevant for brands to really see whether those retailers are obeying those prices or not. Because in some cases, I mean, this is the nature of retail. Some merchants are really aggressive and they actually offer discounts at the middle of the night where the brand is not really watching. So they even go below that MAP price for about 25% during the 2 hours time frame. So they actually cover the whole demand in the market during those 2 hours time. But in the majority of the cases, if a product is priced, if a product has a minimum advertised price, we mostly see the prices are being above the MAP price in the beginning, and then the people are competing against each other by either equaling that to MAP or not. So they always, this is actually a market equilibrium. So it typically remains 5%, 10% above the MAP. So if a merchant is really willing to be competitive, they can either make their price equal to MAP, or again, in some aggressive cases, which is also a use case for our solution, they may even go below MAP prices. But I also noticed that if, for example, we are dealing with a retailer, and if that retailer has, 3 brands in their assortment with MAP prices, they typically avoid monitoring those products, but instead they actually go after monitoring the products without MAP because they are more price competitive. But yeah, I mean, this is how it rolls out.
And it's interesting. For years, I dealt with merchants that had some of those challenges, and we'd come up with options that, depending on, again, who the manufacturers were, that wouldn't break the rules, but that would offer differentiation on site. So at that point, it's different strategy. It's let's get a reward and loyalty program where we can give extra points, extra cash back in essence on those purchases, or let's offer a free product with it that no one else is offering. And, with platforms like Magento, there are extensions that'll do that, where they can maybe even choose the product that they're going to get with it. And so at least, okay, they're going to get something that they're not going to get someone else. The pricing might not be cheaper, but the shopper feels like they won something. They feel like they got something that they weren't otherwise going to. And that's part of the challenge. When you get a shopper that's going to 5 different places and everything's exactly the same, well, something's got to stand out as different. And, you can do that by offering different content and, and really standing out as the experts in the field. You can do that by offering extended warranties that others aren't offering. There are platforms that hook into these e-commerce sites like Clyde that do that.
One thing that we occasionally encounter is the thing that you said. I mean, some websites are actually placing different, various more discounted prices for their loyal customer base. So they have, let's say, a card, loyalty card. So there's this MAP compliant price available on the product page. But if you log in with this loyalty card, blah, 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 you can actually see a discounted price, which is not originally visible for the brand. So they believe that, okay, this merchant is obeying our minimum advertised price.
I mean, I know some that you won't see the discount until you get to the cart, so it's not displayed proper. That one usually has more conflict with some brands. Some of them that for members or people that are logged in, or special VIPs, like you say, recurring customers, that sort of thing, that they get better price breaks. It's interesting figuring that one out, because at the end of the day, I mean, look, if we think about this, like most things in life, it's you build a wall, people figure out how to go over it, under it, break through it. That people are smart, but merchants just want to sell product. So if brands understand, if these manufacturers understand that, if they want to create certain thresholds, usually I think it's, if anything, they should come to the merchant saying, here's a list of 10 things that you can do, so that we don't wind up in an argument about it later.
Yeah, and in some occasions, these prices are not necessarily kind of like given as a rule, but mostly like recommended. So I'm actually more like I like that approach more, because this helps you to see whether your retailers are really playing fair in line with those prices. So according to the compliance of the retailer, for example, the brands might negotiate with them better for their next purchases. So they might provide them a lower purchase cost and stuff. But if they are dealing with a really aggressive player in the market, they might notice that they might need to increase their purchase prices so that they won't be able to, slash the market average and stuff. So recommended price is actually more of the European style, I would say. In the European market, we see that more often, and really like compliance stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's also part of the challenge of the market that the merchants want the same benefits as the brands have in pricing. I mentioned TVs earlier; it just happens to be a hot topic. In recent years, that prices on televisions have continued to come down. And it's not just because manufacturing has gotten somehow so much better. It's that they're bundling in all of the smart technology, all of these, I'll just call them apps. And at that point, they're collecting data, they're selling data. And so they're making their profit on the data. They don't need to make the profit on the hard, durable, on the good, on the TV. So I think, for some merchants, it's the same thing, that they don't need to make a big margin, as the retailer selling the TV, leaving the manufacturer out of that equation for a second. They want to make profit on extended warranties and cables and other peripherals and add-ons. And, the same with a video game system. They don't have to make a lot of money on the console. They want to sell 20 games with it, and everything else that, that you can think of under the sun. So I think that all plays into it. It's that everyone's trying to play by a very similar rule book. Just it's about who writes the rule book.
Yeah, that's correct. Absolutely. And as long as there are rules, like you said, I mean, people oversmart those rules, and this will also drive a different nature to the business, which will then find an equilibrium at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really interesting conversation. I really appreciate your time today. But before we wrap it up, any words of wisdom, anything coming down the pike from your team, any interesting recent, case studies or learnings, or I'm just going to pick your brain for a second. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap for the day?
Sure. I mean, it's not necessarily just about our business, which is like pricing intelligence and stuff, but I am now really, really interested in technologies which are providing the power of automation to all sides of e-commerce businesses. I mean, typically, like solutions like ours were placed more like an enterprise offering. So, small and medium-sized businesses wouldn't afford like automation like us. But nowadays in the ecosystem, especially thanks to e-commerce platforms like Magento, Shopify, this and that, I mean, you can simply plug many technologies like us into your store, even if you're a sole founder, for example, managing an e-commerce store, or if you're a small team of, let's say, 10 people, 20 people, you can really automate many of the stuff that you are currently doing manually. So we, for example, encounter this a lot. So when we talk to, for example, new clients, their typical story is that we originally had 2 people in the team manually monitoring the prices of the competition. So we then found out about your solution and we want to automate that. So this is actually the story that we really like, because those 2 people don't really get fired. Like that's not how it ends, but they actually become users of our solution and they do more value added, let's say, operations in the team. Because I believe this is going to be the way that we need to find for humans to operate in the further digitalizing world. So I'm actually, just because of that, really recommending automated solutions like ours to all size of e-commerce companies out there, rather than doing things in a manual way, because they can actually, for example, improve their customer relationship, which is, I think, the most humanistic part of the business in e-commerce, rather than just doing, stuff that can be automated via tools. They should really try to find stuff that cannot be really easily automated by tools. So in that regard, needless to say, this provides a lot of, let's say, return on investment in hard cash terms, in, time saving terms and stuff. But most important, it also provides, like employee, happiness, because, it's a really terrible feeling. If you know that there's actually a tool that can do the exact same stuff that you're currently doing, I think people really don't like those type of jobs, and I think those type of jobs are really going to be redundant in the future, or they will be replaced. So this is my own bit of recommendation. Just go after every single automation initiative that you can put into your operation, regardless of your size. Don't think that these are all tools for big companies, enterprise companies, but you can really go after Magento Marketplace, Shopify App Store and stuff, and get most out of that.
Well, and I think it's really interesting that for the mid-market, to think that sometimes SMBs, that startups are getting to things faster than they are, because they're innovating and just looking, from the get-go, what's on the market that we're going to benefit from, and piecing together more. Where sometimes when you're already up and running and more established, you don't get to sit down and have those strategy meetings often enough. Strategic planning should happen more often. You should be looking at conversion optimization for the front end, but you should also be looking for optimizations for the back of the house and for other parts of your operation. So always interesting. Well, Burc, really a pleasure having you on today. I look forward to catching up with you again and hearing how the world of prices is, because I have a feeling that this is one in particular that's going to continue to be a hotter and hotter topic in the coming years. That it's just the nature of the industry that we're in. For our listeners, as always, thanks for tuning in. We'll have more great content like this for you very soon. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and happy selling out there.